Welcome to the Church Resource, where we talk about the best resources for pastors, leaders, and lay people. I'm your host, Jeff Oliver, looking today at a book that is, it might cause you some pause, let's say, because it is not a Christian book per se. It's not written by, as far as I can tell, a Christian author. He does not include that information in his bio, but it is not anti-Christian. It is not non-Christian. It just doesn't have scriptures throughout. It will, I think, provide some very wise help for you on the topic of leadership. It is called the Savage Leader: 13 Principles to Become a Better Leader from the Inside Out. And just keep in mind, Jesus even talks about the Jews and that we ought to learn business practices from the Jews, non-Christians. And so I think it's helpful for us to think about this particular book, and when we are presented with books that are not necessarily written from a Christian perspective, something that you would not be able to find in a Christian bookstore or on Christian book distributors online or anything like that. But this is the case where, you eat the whole fish and spit out the bones. And I think that in this book, there's not a lot to spit out. There's a lot for you to take in and use, and to be helpful for you in your ministry as you seek to be a leader. Now, whether you are a leader in a church, a leader in a particular ministry or a small group, or even in your home, I think all people, especially men, are called to be leaders. And we all have some aspect, men or women, have some aspect of leadership, a place where we need to be the authority in a place, and we need to lead people. We need to take people from one place to another in terms of being successful in what we do. So I think that this is so helpful for so many people, and it's one that you're going to need to take a look at. It's a very short book, I think. As far as I am concerned, and looking at other books on leadership, we've looked at several on this podcast, but it is less than 150 pages, and I think you can take it in pretty quickly, but it's something you're going to need to maybe go back to pretty often. So what he does is he looks at, there's this whole field of research on leadership, and it's something that space is pretty crowded, and there's a lot of chatter about what it takes to be a leader and how to be the best leader you can be, and leadership styles and that kind of thing. What he says is that we're going to turn this on its head a little bit and give really a new leadership model. What I want to show you is here, if you're watching, right here at the front, there is a helpful chart that really sets the stage for the whole book. And I think this is smart to put this in the book. I might have put it at the end of the book, but this is something that is going to give you, since it is at the beginning, a preview of what you're going to be looking at for the rest of the book. This is, I think, a helpful tool for you to look at and say, what's the core of the message here? Here are some ways that I can look at the things that are a comparison between traditional leadership and savage leaders. Remember, that's the name of the book, and he's going to use that often in there. So in order to become, to be the savage leader, here's some examples. The traditional leader would focus on being successful. A savage leader aims for greatness, not just success. Focuses on who they think they should be. That's a traditional leader. The savage leader is confident in who they are and is rooted in their values and beliefs. The traditional leader leads with title, status, and credentials. The savage leader leads with strengths. The traditional leader is resume focused. The savage leader is experience driven. And so there are a couple of pages here of this chart that will distinguish between traditional leadership and savage leadership. And so that's worth the book right there, is just seeing that. And then the rest of the book really fleshes out that chart and shows you what we mean by that. So the first principle is that we use values to anchor and guide you. So what values, what are your core beliefs that you have that are going to determine how you lead? And so he says that values guide our lives and careers. And he uses great illustrations in here from athletes, from other people in business leadership. And so I love the way that he does that. There are so many examples, as this is not just heady philosophical kind of look at leadership, but he's going to give lots of examples about how people have carried out these kinds of principles that he's presenting in the book. One thing that I like about this book, that every so often, every page and a half or so, he's going to give you a key takeaway. Now, this is a paragraph or two or three maybe that summarize what you've just read. And so for a reader like me, that's crucial. I just sometimes I can get to the end of a chapter and not remember anything that I've read because it's all been good maybe, but it's just hard to kind of put that all back together into something that you can take away, that you can use. So the key takeaway, and he's going to give you that, and this is going to be reminding you of what you've read to help to solidify it in your mind, and then to, I think, be able to use that better so that you can remember that and be able to put it into practice. So he gives that very helpful thing in each of the books, and several times per chapter. So you can't miss the message. The second chapter is that we adapt best practices for authenticity, and it gives a helpful quotation there at the beginning that there must be a certain amount of imitation, copying in outward technique, but when there is inward psychological imitation, surely we cease to be creative. So he wants to remind us that, yes, we can learn from others. We don't need to duplicate what others do exactly. I mean, he gives the example of people will look at these millionaires. They look at somebody like who's passed away now, but Steve Jobs, and just look at the fact that he had the same wardrobe all the time, and the fact that he didn't have to think about that because he had so many other things to think about. He would look in his closet and pick the same black shirt like the one he wore yesterday, and he'd wear that, and it'd be the same, almost a uniform that he would wear. So people took that and they said, well, if I wear the same shirt, the same type of shirt every day of my life, then I'll be like Steve Jobs. Well, it doesn't work that way. But so this is just a kind of a silly example of trying to copy, mimic somebody else in their way so that you can be like them. That's not the way that happens. And he points that out, that this is best practices for you being your authentic self and you being really a true leader in not following somebody else's lead, but yes, learning from others in that space and in how to be a good leader. Again, key takeaways in here throughout the chapter. And at the end of the chapters, he is going to give us a challenge. This is called the challenge, put it into practice. So he has some next steps. Okay, now that you've learned this principle, now that we've talked about that a little bit, how could we use that? How could we put that into practice ourselves? For example, which lessons or tips will offer the biggest benefit to my life and career? Which best practices fit my style and strengths, and so on. So that's from that second chapter on authenticity. And I think that's great for you to pause at the end of a chapter and take a look at, okay, what have I learned? And now how am I going to use this? And concretize that so that it's not, it's not philosophical. It's not something that I've just read. It was a nice read, but what can I do with that now? How can I see myself using that? When I was in car sales, I remember we'd ask, okay, what's the first road trip that you're going to take in this vehicle with your family? Does this car fit in your garage? So getting people to think ahead of how they're going to use this, put it into practice, and what that looks like with this principle now, or this car, hopefully, and what that looks like in the future. So I like that part that he puts that in there so that we can really get an idea of what this looks like practically in my life. One final thing I'll tell you about is there's, at the end, he says, a reader bonus, the Savage Leader Field Guide. Now, he says this is dozens of practices in this book designed to help you bring these principles to life. Now, to help you on this journey, he says, I've created a free bonus, the Savage Leader Field Guide. And to access that, he gives the website, thesavageleader.com, and he encourages you now to take this book, to read through it with that helpful guide there. And it's something that I think you could take somebody else with. If you're mentoring somebody, you could take them along and show them that and work through this book together. Again, not a Christian resource, but not an anti-Christian resource. I think it's something that we can definitely use and glean the good stuff from. There's a lot of good in this book, and I hope you'll take a look at it. It's one book that has been helpful to me in ministry, and hope it gives you a bit of direction as you prayerfully consider which resources will best help you and the people you minister to. Thanks for listening to The Church Resource. Please make sure you give us a review. And if you have any suggestions of resources that you would like us to look at, just email us at thechurchresource@gmail.com. That's thechurchresource@gmail.com.